Welcome to the How to Program with Java podcast, where all you need is the desire to learn, and you too can become a Java programmer with absolutely no knowledge of programming. And now, your host, Trevor Page.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to the How to Program with Java podcast. This is episode number 7. Glad that you can join me once again, and today's topic will be about methods. So let's jump right into the content. So, methods. What are methods? How are they useful? How are they used in Java? Are they specific to Java? All very good questions and all things that I will be addressing. So, first let's start with a little explanation of what a method really is. Well, in Java, which is an object-oriented programming, a method is essentially a block of code that is itself associated directly with the class or the object that it is inside of. Okay? It's a little bit of code that you would put specifically inside of a class to carry out some sort of behavior that you will identify. Okay? So an example of this would be let's go back to the examples of users and logging into a web page like you would log into Facebook. Some methods that I would make or code would be perhaps create user. Okay, so that would be a method that I could code into a user class. Okay. And I would invoke this method or call this method. Those are two words, terminologies that I would use to describe the action of actually executing the code that is within the method. So I would call the method or invoke the method create user whenever I decide or whenever someone tries to create a new user account. So if you would go to facebook.com and you would register yourself with your email address and your username and everything like that, and you would say save, or you would say create user, it would then go and invoke the create user method. Okay? So that's kind of a basic idea of what a method actually is. So methods are very useful, and I'd say they're really the key to making programs flexible, useful, and even maybe easy to code. Okay, methods allow us to essentially rerun specific pieces of code at any given time. Okay, so like I mentioned, you could have a create user method. What's nice is you code or you create the code that would be needed to be executed once when creating a user. You write that code in. You say, okay, you'd have to insert a new row into your database, and you would need to assign that new row of the database the information that is passed from the user who's actually creating their user account. So they specified their email address, you need to put that into the database. They specified their username, you need to put that in the database. They specified a password that they want to use, put that in the database. Okay, that's all code that needs to be done, but you only need to write that code out once. And then you put that code inside of the method create user or create user account or whatever you want to name it. When you do that, you write the code out once, but then you can invoke it as many number of times as you wish within your program. So as it pertains to my example, I would be calling that method or invoking that method every single time someone goes to facebook.com/ create new user, and then clicks on the save button. Okay? Another example of a method you could use is a method to log in or to validate user login. Okay? So, you can imagine they'd go to facebook.com, and on that web page there's a username and password, boxes. They would fill it out, and they would say, click a button and say log in. Then you would invoke or call the, login method or the, is this a valid user method, okay? And that would go and check their username and their password against the database and actually see if that's a valid combination of username and password. So you see how methods can be quite useful, and it's really rooted around not having to write the same code over and over and over again. Because why would you want to write a whole bunch of code over and over again, just to have to log a user in, every single time someone clicks on, the login button on the Facebook page or the login button on the, Facebook / new user page, or who knows what avenues could exist that would lead you to needing to run a specific piece of code in a method. I guess logging in is not a good example because you really should only have one login page. But let's say there's an update password method. Perhaps the update password method would be called from several different web pages. Okay, maybe there's one in the user account details page. Maybe there's one in another page that you get redirected to if someone else tries to log into your account 5 times and fails. Maybe it sends you an email and say go to this page to change your password because it looks like someone's trying to hack into your account, or something like that. Who knows, right? There could be a whole bunch of different avenues that exist that eventually would just need to run that same piece of code. So the key is you have a method that actually has that code in one place, and you could call it from wherever you are in the application. Okay? So that's why methods are so useful. That's why programs can be a bit more flexible when you use them. That's why methods make programming very easy, because you only have to do it once. You write the code once, and you can call it as many times as you like, and pretty much from wherever you like. Okay? So, as I've already hinted at, methods are used to sort of clump together or gather together code into sort of logical groupings. Okay? So each method, you would give it a name, and the code inside of the method would sort of reflect what the name means, or what the name sort of hints at. Okay? So if you have a method that's called validate user, you name the method validate user, you would expect that the code inside of that method would do just that. It would take some user credentials, like a username and password, and then check the database and see if that username exists and if the password matches that username. And if it does exist, then we say, okay, yes, the user is valid, or we say, no, the user is not valid. Same with the create new user method. You call it create new user, and you would expect it to do exactly what it's named. You would expect it to create a new user in the database. Okay, you see what I'm getting at here? Or change password, right? You would expect that code inside of change password to actually change a password for, let's say, a particular user. Okay, you wouldn't want your change password method to create a new user and to try to log someone in, because that doesn't make sense, okay? And although you could actually implement the code to do that, it's absolutely not advised, and it's just not a good programming practice, okay? What you really need to get into the habit of is making sure that the actions that take place within your method actually reflect what you've named your method, just because it makes the code so much easier to read and so much easier to just to work with in general. Okay. Now, another interesting thing to note about methods is that they can allow you to extract information as well once they've actually completed their execution. So this is called a return value. Okay. In Java, we actually use the word return, and then we put, some sort of value after the keyword return, and that actual value will be sort of returned outside of the method to whatever it was that called the method or invoked the method. Okay? So a good example of what I mean by this is what I've already sort of hinted at is the user valid. So we could name our method is user valid, okay? And that it's actually a bit of a convention to start a method name with the word is, because it's kind of like a question. we're asking, is this a valid user? Okay, is user valid? And we actually pass in a user object, or you could just pass in a username and password, or however you want to implement it, okay? So you have an is user valid method, and you pass in a username or user object, like I said, and it will go and it will carry out the instructions that you would think it would need to carry out, which is taking the username, password, checking in the database, seeing if this is a valid user, and then it would return an answer. Okay, and the answer in this case would be a yes or a no, which can be translated in the programming language to be a Boolean, which is true or false. So we can have a method called isValidUser, pass in a user that we want to check to see if it's valid or not. We execute the code, or at least the code will be executed inside that will check to see if the user is, valid or not, and then return the answer to the question, true or false. True, they are valid. False, they are not valid. Okay? And that would be passed back to, that Boolean value, true or false, would be passed back to whoever it was that called the method. So, for example, the workflow could be, you're on the facebook.com page, the login page, and you say, you click the login button. So then your login page code invokes the method, is the user valid, and passes in what they've just typed in, the username and the password. It goes and checks, and it returns the answer back to the login page. Now that's very handy because then we need to do one of two things, okay? We either need to allow them to go forward to see the next step if they are valid, which in the case of Facebook is just, you log in and you see your profile or your, timeline or whatever it is. And if that is the case, if you are a valid user. But if you're not a valid user, you need to display perhaps an error message to say, no, this is not a valid, username, or not a valid password, or just not valid credentials, however you want to handle the situation. Okay? And that's why methods and returning values is also very useful. Okay? And can you see how that would be useful? Because we have a decision to make. We have a control structure that we need to plug in, which will be an if statement. So we say if the user is valid, then log in and go to, the home page. Else, or if not valid, then display an error message. Okay? So that's a great sort of workflow of how you would use a method with a return value. Now, on the flip side of that, methods actually don't need to return a value. And you might say, well, why wouldn't I always have it return a value? Well, the answer is simply, sometimes you just don't need to get a value back from the method that you call. Like, for example, if you want to create a new user, you call your, create new user method, and you just want it to create a user in the database, and that's it. You don't care about getting anything back from that. You just want it to go create the user, and then you could get on doing whatever it is that you need to do within your program, okay? So you don't always need to return a value. Another good example is, you want to call a method that will send an email. So let's say, you say you have a method called, send email, and you are passing into this method, you pass in an email address, a subject, and a message. Okay? You would want your method to email or send an email to the email address that you provide with the subject that you provide and with a message that you provide, and that's it. You don't care about anything else. You just want to, invoke the method. You want to know that the message is sent, and you'll know that because it'll execute every single line in that method, and then that's it. You can walk away and you're happy, okay? So that's, there's a bunch of cases where, you don't need a return value for a method, okay? Now, this specific code, whether you're coding a method to have a return value or not, is done in the one of two ways inside of Java, okay? The syntax, which I'll talk about just a tiny bit here, is for the method is you would declare a name for the method. Like I said, is valid user, create new user, send email, whatever you want. I think you can name the method whatever you want to name it. I think the only restriction is you can't start a method name with any symbols or any numbers, I believe. I think the method name can have numbers in it, you just can't start it with a number. So name it almost anything you like, and then you have your brackets, and inside of the brackets, just like if you're writing an if statement, you have the if, and then you open a round bracket. Same thing, you name the method whatever you want it to name it, and you have some round braces. Inside of those, you can give it parameters, which are what you're passing in. They're also called arguments. Okay, you've seen this before because you've actually already seen an example of a method, and that is our public static void main method. I talked about the main method, I think, a little bit in the last podcast episode. The main method is, of course, a method because I call it a main method. And inside of the after the main keyword, you have the brackets, and you have actually a parameter that you're passing into it. Okay, and in the case of the main method, I believe you're passing in an array of strings or something like that. But I mean, it's completely up to you. You decide what it is that you want to be passing in to your method because it's your method. You can create it. You can make it do whatever it is you want to do. And subsequently, you could also not pass anything into the method. That's completely fine too. There's plenty of methods that don't take any parameters because they don't need any. Okay? So that's sort of the syntax. You have the name of the method. You have your arguments that you pass in, your parameters that you pass in. And then within the method itself, you can have whatever code you want to have. And then you can either end it with a return statement or not end it with a return statement. Okay? Now, here's the key. If you want to return something, okay, you need to specify a return type or a variable type that you're going to be returning. And this is actually done just before the name of the method itself. So really, the syntax needs to be return type first, then the name of the method, then the parameters that you're passing in, and then you have your, round or your curly braces, and you have your contents of the actual method itself. Okay, so the return type is going to be whatever, either something that you want to return or nothing. So if it's a method that you're not returning anything in, you actually just use the keyword void, void. Okay, void means nothing. We don't want to be returning anything, so this is just a method that will execute, and once it's done, it's done. Okay? Or, if you do want to return something, instead of putting void, you just put the actual variable type right there in that spot. Okay? So, in the example of checking to see if the user is valid, okay, your is user valid method, just before the name, we would have the return type, which is actually a Boolean, right? It's a question, is user valid, and we're returning a Boolean. So you just put a Boolean, the word Boolean, right before the name of the method. So how it would look is just Boolean, is user valid, and then inside of the parenthesis, you'd have the arguments that you're passing in, which let's say is a user object, and then you have the curly braces, and inside of there you put in your actual code that you want it to do to validate if the user is a valid user or not. And then you would just say return, true or false or whatever, depending on if it's a valid user or if it's not a valid user. And then that's it. Okay? Fairly straightforward. Again, I'm going to have a link to a little tutorial that I have that talks about a method, so you can actually see this syntax for yourself. Okay? Again, it doesn't translate very well over audio, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a heads up as to the return type stuff and the void keyword, because those are important to know and to understand perhaps before you get into looking at actual examples. So by all means, you can go to howtoprogramwithjava.com/session7, and that's where the notes are going to be the show notes, where I will have, at the bottom, I'll have a section called homework, and I will put the link for the article that you need to read through, just to solidify your understanding of what a method is and what the syntax actually looks like for some, example methods that I've outlined there. All right. So before I go today, I just want to send out a quick announcement for all of you. I've been receiving a lot of requests or suggestions from readers and I suppose even podcast listeners regarding a need for up-to-date and comprehensive videos to help teach people how to program in Java, okay? So I've actually taken that to heart, and I've gone out, and for the last, week and a half or so, I've been busy building a website that does just that will teach you how to program in Java with actual video tutorials, okay? Now, I'm actually not just going to be teaching Java, I'm going to be teaching the skills that you would need to be an actual web developer, okay? I've been talking about, I've been focusing a lot of these tutorials on the podcast with examples of web-type situations, like logging into a web page and that kind of thing, users and all that stuff. And that's because I think that there's a lot of merit in knowing how to be a web programmer, okay? Knowing Java is fantastic. It is a skill that you absolutely need. It's fundamental to your, tool set as a programmer. But extending it a little bit more it's very rewarding. I did a little bit of research on web development and jobs specifically in web development, and I noticed that they were actually up about 50% since 2008. So that's fantastic. There's definitely a growing demand for web developers. And more specifically, on this Java tutorial or Java video tutorial website that I've created, I will be teaching things like Spring Framework, okay? And that is a technology that is used in web development. And jobs that require you to have Spring Framework knowledge are actually up as well, 75% since 2008. So that's very, very good, and it's a very good trend. I'm happy to see that those skills are becoming more and more, in demand. And further to that, there's actually stuff I teach called jQuery. Okay, it's kind of a flavor of JavaScript, two technologies that are used in web development. I will also be teaching that stuff in the Java Video Tutorials website, and skills. People who are hiring who need skills in jQuery are actually up. It's actually 600,000%. So that's a huge one. It's absolutely skyrocketing the number of people that are asking for workers with knowledge in jQuery. So that's a great trend as well. And even something like another avenue you could go with your Java knowledge is Android development. So for mobile phones, I think Androids do run on the Java platform, so it's quite easy to transition yourself from a web developer to be a mobile phone mobile developer with the Android phones. And even BlackBerry, I believe, runs on Java as well. But looking up the statistic for the Android development jobs, those are actually up 4,000%, I believe, since 2010. So, all these different facets of programming specific to web development and even mobile development are just exploding, okay? So I've made it my mission to create a set of tutorials using the video medium to really hammer home everything that you're going to need to know to be a great Java web developer, okay? So if you're interested, you can head over to javavideotutorials.net, okay? I've set up a website there. You can go in and you can create a user account for yourself and log in, and I give away some videos and stuff like that. But what I'm doing is I'm launching a contest right now, and I think that's really exciting. It's the first contest that I've ever done, and the contest, you can see it's available on the website. If you go to javavideotutorials.net, there'll be a little tab there. You can go on the top and click on contest, and I'm actually giving away 5 memberships for the site. Okay, it's valued at around $210 per membership, and all you need to do to win, you just go onto that tab and you just tell me why you need or why you would love to have this membership to the website, and that's it. You post a little bit. I have a little plug-in there for Facebook. You post on Facebook. Tell me a good reason why it is that you want to learn all this stuff and how it'll be helpful to you, and then you tag my product page or whatever. I have all the instructions there, and then I'll be picking the best 5 people, best 5 stories or best 5 reasons why people will benefit from the use of this product, and I will be giving away the memberships for free for those people. So by all means, head over to that. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun, and I think it'll be it's a fairly easy way to enter a contest. It's going to be it's just going to be a lot of fun. I think you guys are going to love it. So check it out, javavideotutorials.net, and go to the little contest tab and have at it, everyone. All right. So, as always, it's been a pleasure, and I can't wait until the next episode, and I look forward to seeing you all there. Take care, and bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the How to Program with Java podcast. Please visit howtoprogramwithjava.com for more useful Java tutorials.